This is Taking the Lead, a podcast for B2B tech professionals, leaders, and executives who want to learn from female icons in the tech industry. In each episode, host Christina Brady interviews women who are driving revenue for some of the most respected tech companies in the world. Are you ready to get inspired?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Taking the Lead. I'm Christina Brady. I am your host, and I am the CEO of Luster, and I am joined by the incredible Jenn Glabicky. Jenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Absolutely. And before we dive into our incredible content today, I would love to thank our partners, Women in Sales, Renegade Operations, and Luster. Women in Sales, if you've never heard of them, they are focused on elevating, empowering, and promoting women within the sales profession. And in order to realize this vision and create a more equitable sales team in the future, they recognize everyone needs to be a part of that conversation, women and allies alike. If you would like to be a part of this incredible community and resource, head over to www.women-in-sales.com and you can join the conversation on Slack. It is free to join, no cost associated. And speaking of Renegade Operations, if you are struggling with growing your revenue with traditional frameworks and tactics, then prepare to challenge the status quo and unleash untapped revenue potential with Renegade Operations. It is a women-owned RevOps consultancy. Laura Wheeler, the founder, has over 16 years in direct sales, operations, and enablement. You are going to want to optimize for your unique value to buyers and join the rebellion that prioritizes uncovering hidden stakeholders and ignite human behavioral shifts. Essentially, it's time to accelerate your go-to-market results in a new and revolutionary way. Head over to renegadeoperations.com to learn more. And finally, Luster. Luster.ai is scaling sales practice with custom-built conversational AI technology, providing sales teams with the ability to master call simulations and skill drills that mimic real-world customer and prospect interactions. It is built by go-to-market experts for go-to-market teams, and they aim to expose enablement ROI and bring predictive enablement to the hands of all. If you are looking to predict the skill gaps before they impact your revenue in real time and address them, then visit luster.ai to learn more and get your hands on the beta version. Those of you who are watching us on YouTube, you can see that my dog has joined the party.
Yeah, as she should.
As she should be. You know, she'll visit and just say, hey, I need a little bit of loving. She's going to stare at me aggressively for the course of this show. Jenn, you have a phenomenal background. One, welcome to the show. And two, tell us the tale. Tell us the tale. Jenn and I recently were lucky enough to spend a little bit of time together.
Yes.
She randomly, and I don't know how we got, you had all of this random medical knowledge where we were talking about something. You're like, well, technically, the body, you drop something that nobody that doesn't have that kind of acumen would actually know. Tell us how you got where you are and your unique journey to get there.
Yes. And by the way, congratulations on the recent launch of Luster.
She's alive and brilliant. You're alive and brilliant.
Let her shine in all her glory. It's as she should. So congrats. Yes, dropped all the random knowledge. It's kind of for those, not to age myself here, but Mary Beth Dinberg, useless information for your everyday life. That's me about the human body and all the medical knowledge. Yeah, I've always had like a knack for science, all the things with medical. We've had a lot of medical folks in my background in my family, but I just love it. Went to school, skipped senior year of college, senior year of high school to go to college. I was nicknamed and dubbed Doogie Howser by campus police just because I tended to have a lot of credits, 21 credits any semester, just to try and graduate early. Definitely was not somebody that was out partying because I was such a nerd. Still kind of am, but that's okay.
Not even nerd parties? Like they're in parties. Go to nerd parties, or were you a solo lone wolf nerd?
I think I was just like a lone wolf nerd because I wasn't like really in one group or another. I'd get invited to parties like, hey, Jenn, come and, hang out with us, have a couple beers, whatever. Sorry, guys, on my way to OChem. It's Thursday night. What else would I be doing? So that was kind of like my MO. And when I'd come home from like pre-med club, the campus police would pick me up because our campus wasn't in the best area. So I'd get dropped off and not one person would think twice. They'd be like, Jenn must be coming home from pre-med club because I had a backpack, like a Ninja Turtle backpack full of books and carrying my OChem books. So super cool.
Which turtle? My son is going to want me to ask. Or was it?
Definitely Raphael was my fave.
I mean, the science guy.
Also, I did name my cat after Michelangelo, though, because he was cool. Mikey the cat. Just trying to impress the neighborhood boys. Epic fan.
you have this pet. So in high school, leaving high school a year early, I think from a social standpoint, it's like then you're consistently the youngest person, which I feel like is better in college. Well, because when you're too young in high school, everyone's driving before you and you're like, I can't. But it's tough in college because everyone can legally drink before you. And you and I both know that nobody drinks illegally in college. Everyone until they're 21.
Yeah.
That had to be difficult. You also wanted to graduate college early. What is the rush for you? Like, what was the rush in wanting to get out into the world and get it done?
I just really I figured if I was going to go the med school route, I wanted to like get early. Because I'm like, oh, all doctors graduate when they're like 35. That's so old. Let's all laugh now.
Yeah, well,
I don't know how that worked out for me, late 30s. But yeah, I just figured I'm like, I want to get a head start. I want to be a really young doctor and get my life going so early. And yeah, didn't go to med school, horrible test taker, but I loved the actual anatomy and physiology. And yeah, my A&P book is still here. My, musculoskeletal books, all these things still here. And I refer to them, like I still use them. So
refer to them. When would you need to refer to? When is it like, you know what? Thank goodness I have a book for this. Like, in what scenario were you like, I must refer to the medical journal?
My mom had hip surgery last year. My dad had triple bypass surgery last summer. So I actually refer to them pretty often. Isn't that crazy?
Care for people. And you didn't completely leave the medical world behind. You may not have gone to med school, but what did you do with it?
I did go, yes. So after med school, I didn't go to med school. Stop that. But
look, your life's not over.
I read about that all the time. I actually, after college, went up and down the East Coast and applied to every single pharmaceutical company I could to try and sell pharmaceuticals. So I sold pharma for about 5 years all around in and out of the Boston area. It was interesting, like a very interesting role. My favorite was when I was carrying my bag of, samples and I was going into an office. I was all excited. I was all dressed up, like ready to go. And I tripped. Like, my parents did not name me Grace for a reason. And I tripped like right into a pothole. All my pharmaceutical bag went all over the place. And a guy stepped over me in the parking lot. Didn't help me. I've got a hole in my pants, my nice little dress pants from TJ Maxx or Marshall. But my nice little dress pants, and it was like butt over tea kettle. And it just like, I'm mortified, but it's okay, but yeah, so I sold pharma for like 5 years. And they always say like the rule there, if you want to go into pharma, is don't stay in longer than 2 years if you want to go to med device, which is where I went after. But I stayed for 5 years and went to med device, which is a whole different ballgame than pharmaceuticals.
Oh, yeah.
So you're actually like med device, that's where you're putting your actual medical knowledge to, into play. So I was selling, it was the coolest story. I was selling a device that it's like cautery, so it's like a ballpoint pen. So when you're going against the skin, it's letting saline go out. So instead of like a Bovie that chars your skin to stop bleeding, this actually stops bleeding, but more so less charring, less smoke. So it's less detrimental to both the patient and the staff in OR. And I remember it was for a hip replacement, actually, in Connecticut. And the surgeon was so nice to me. And I was watching the rep. That was part of my interview, is to be able to watch the rep. And I remember being in there and watching the surgeon, and I'm like soaking it all up. And I had studied this hip replacement over and over and taken notes of I knew everything about the acetabulum and all these different things, right? So I'm looking, and all of a sudden I step back. And the surgeon says, no, Jen, would you like to come forward, a little closer for this? And I says, no, thank you, sir. I'm just going to wait, here for this part. And he says, Jen, you came to watch the surgery. Come closer. And I says, no, thank you. I will, sir. I just would like to watch this part back here. Well, the reason being is because when that part of the surgery comes, blood squirts out. And if I had stood right where he wanted me to, the blood would have come right at me. So he was testing me to see if I really knew the surgery well. So after the surgery, he came running out of the locker room and said, Jen, come sit with me. And I said, sure, okay. And I says, what can I do for you? Thank you so much for allowing me to watch surgery, etc. And he says, I have a book I want to show you that I just wrote. And this book was on here, for knee and hip surgery. And he says, I'd really like you to take a look at this and give me your thoughts. So when I come out with my 4th version, you can give me notes that I can put in here because you really seem to know your stuff. And I'd love to be able to add your addition in here, your additions, whatever. And I was like, and the rep I was shadowing was like, you've never asked me to do that. And he says, you've never been so involved in surgery as Jenn has. So it was a really cool moment for me. Like, I know what I'm doing. Like, all the work I've done is really coming to fruition here. So it was a really cool moment for me. But yeah.
Like, half of that, well, I was like 80% of that is beautiful because your preparedness, your lack of ego about that, your confidence in what you knew. There's all of these like combination of hard and soft skills that brought you to that moment. 20% of that, though, is outrageous. Like, could you imagine if in any other field, that was the way they tested you, was like, if you get it wrong, I'm going to squirt you with this unconscious person's blood. That were like, one, imagine.
Like, here you go.
How certainly be a different kind of impactful, like, I don't know, staff's onboarding where it's like, final test, do your role play. If you get it wrong, we do have an unconscious person with an open hip. Get it right. So quick study, low ego, high confidence in the right way. How long were you in medical sales before you transitioned? That.
So I actually was in medical sales. That's a good question. Started in 2012. That role I was only in for about a year and a half. And it was interesting. And then I ended up going into a marketing role. Yeah, complete change. I had an opportunity. I don't know about you, but I look at marketing and sales as peanut butter and jelly. I'm very, very curious. And opportunities present themselves. And I was able to get the role from a gentleman that I had worked with I did marketing on my own. More like hit the streets type marketing. And this gentleman said, I was really impressed with your work. We have a full-time role during the World Cup. If you'd like to come on and help us and be the head of marketing for a pop-up shop that we have, contract role, let's do it. Okay, great. So I did that. And then a gentleman that I had, worked with in the OR says, we have a job at Johnson & Johnson if you'd like. And that was my favorite role I ever had. It was fantastic. Just out of the blue, having someone call you and say, hey, I thought of you for this role was really cool. It just shows you like the relationships you build. You never know what kind of an impact you're having. Never would have thought someone would have called me for that. That was a role where I was able to use my knowledge, again, using these books, these textbooks behind me. But it was a role where we would put down both didactic and cadaveric. So PowerPoint presentations and cadaver presentations. So we would have to...
Presentations?
I'm putting that nicely, but we would basically use the cadavers to what we learned in the presentations. We would teach a hip replacement, for example. And then we would use the cadavers to have the residents and fellows learn what they just learned in the presentation to go and do. So we would pull in surgeons from around the country that are well known in hip replacements. We would look over the presentations, make sure they're on label, have them come in, and then we would make sure that the cadavers were there and able to do it and have all the equipment ordered, the right equipment, the right tables to do those things, because sometimes there's a certain table based on the approach, like all of these things. And I loved it. It was so fun because I wasn't selling, but I was in a way, because it was like I was that third party, right? So that customer education piece was so vital, right? And I'm able to apply that to customer success now, and I just adore it. I love it, Christina. So I'm just thankful to have these different areas, right? The sales, the marketing, customer success, and customer education. It's been a whirlwind.
It's also so much more broad than so many people, which it's actually, if you take a step back and you look at the breadth of your knowledge and your experiences and the roles that you've sat in, even the field that you were in where it requires precision and getting it right. Like, you can't exactly be like, you know what, I'm going to do this one in my own way. It's not like a typical SaaS, even sales process or marketing process where it's like, listen, I'm going to add flavor to it. You don't necessarily want people adding their own flavor to like the hip replacement. You want people just to do the hip replacement. But if you look back, it actually makes a lot of sense that you wound up in a role like Enablement, which is so all encompassing in a variety of all of these different skills and tying them all together. Yeah. And the fact that you have that marketing background on top of it too, it just makes you powerful because you can speak to so many different types of roles.
Spot on. Yeah, you're so spot on. And I ended up, it's always interesting. One of my first managers in the pharmaceutical industry had said to me, if I'm not in the trenches with my sales reps, I can't ever ask them to do a specific thing. And that's always stuck with me. So I thought of it I know at some point I feel like I'm gonna move on and break out of my shell in a way. So what I ended up doing is going back into sales, and I sold spine medical equipment from the J&J job. And that was more intense in terms of you're really right up next to the surgeon. I mean, without breaking the sterile field, but you're right up in front of the surgeon, and it's like, well, make sure, that's a X size screw, or no, let's use this size rod, or, you're looking at the x-rays with the surgeon, and you're making sure, I mean, they make the ultimate decision, obviously, but you have to know that equipment so you can help them through surgeries. You have to help the tech in helping them make sure they're choosing the right piece of equipment to give to the surgeon. So that was really fun. I loved being in the OR. I thought that was a great, I'm like, this is so good. So the hell with medical school, I'm glad I got to go and do this. And, you're putting the sets together downstairs to make sure they get washed correctly and put together and all these things and having backup. But, and then now going into enablement, a gal that I had worked with again at Johnson & Johnson, she had called me and she said, hey, I know we both got laid off. And I said, yep, we did. Her and I would be the ones burning the midnight oil. It was either her or the cleaning staff that would be at the office at 1 a.m. with me. And she said, I've got this job. It deals with sales. It's called sales enablement. And I was like, easy. I did sales before. What can be hard about that?
I enabled.
Yeah, I can enable the sales, all the sales. So I'm thinking it's easy. So I got into the role, and shame on me for being a little cocky with it, of thinking I knew. I got my butt handed to me.
Oh, just on a platter right there for you.
Yeah, right there. That little porky old pig butt was there.
It's the cute little butt. What happened? So, I mean, and it's interesting, right? Because as I'm listening to you, I would think most people would actually feel the opposite. I know most people, if having to stand in a surgical environment and guiding such a high pressure decision, like I would be one of those where I don't know, in that sort of setting where it's like, what bolt are we going to put in this person's spine? I feel like as confident as I am, I would do that thing where I'm like, definitely going to want to use that one, but like, I don't know though. So that way, if I'm wrong, I'm like, well, let's get back up off of that. I think most people would feel like the pressure of that alone will cause their butt to be handed to them. And for you, it's so interesting that in that very, very precise, high pressure environment, you're like seemingly cool as a cucumber. You get to enablement, different story.
Yeah. I think it was more so because I'm like, oh, this will be easy, because I just came from that environment of like, the pressure was always on, of making sure that I knew the right part of the spine, that X type of screw and size of screw should go there. And will we breach, the spinal canal? And will we do these things? Yeah. And to me, I cared so much about each patient, because when you're asked who's the most important person in the room, everyone's like, the surgeon. No, it's the patient. And so you just want to make sure everything is so right. And I'm a perfectionist with that, of like T's crossed, I's dotted, double, triple, quadruple check. Make sure you have a backup kit. Make sure you have all these things. So I'm like, enablement? Oh, okay. Well, I know how sales reps are. I was a sales rep, so I get, and so these type of things, it's like, I felt like I could understand it, but I didn't know all the things that went with it. Right. So I'm like, oh, training? I can do the training. Now I know it's not just training, right? So I know the things that go along with enablement, and I was excited for the challenge because I was able to learn more, right? So I love that she's like an OG for enablement, Barbara Mazziotti. She's been good because I'll never forget, she challenged me. She's like, I want to see you one day up on the stage, and I want to be able to hear you talk about enablement as if you've been there for umpteen years. And I always took that to heart. And it was really a full circle moment, because in Boston last year, during one of the SEC events, I, was there, and I had prepared a presentation about content and tech stacks. Those are my like wheelhouse areas. So I go up on stage and talk about content from when I worked with her at the company we worked at. Who's sitting in the audience but Barbara Mazziotti? Oh. And I was able to like tell everyone, I was like, guys, this is a full circle moment for me, because my OG of enablement is here. She's going to be able to like listen to me talk about how I've helped with content governance, what a tough project it was. I'm going to flash stuff up from that company, and I said, and have Barbara here. And Barbara just sat there like this the entire time with her hands up to her mouth, like in a prayer. And I was like, Barbara, and to hear her praise afterwards. And that day I had my new boss with me. It was the first time I ever met him. So it was like, wow, I have my first ever boss and my new boss, first day I'm ever meeting him. And I was like, okay, Barbara, you can tell him all the bad things now about me now that I'm done, But it was cool to like learn that and know that I've really been putting in the work, right? And you've got to put in that work to get where you want to go. And I now, I've set goals for myself, three every year, and they are tough goals. Whether I hit them, I don't give up on them. So yeah.
Well, that's who you are. Do you think that part of the reason that it's so difficult to nail down enablement is because as you're going through your earlier history, you're referencing these books behind you, right? You're referencing this is the roadmap for how you do this. And these are the really specific instructions as to how to get there, right? It's this bolt or it's this bolt or it's this process or it's this process. And there is a repeatable, proven, trainable playbook, right? It's outlined very clearly. If you were to stand in a room of enablement professionals and ask all of them to write the definition and the roles and responsibilities of enablement on a piece of paper, I'd be willing to bet that most of them wouldn't match each other. And so was that part of, for you, what made it so difficult is there's actually not one definition. And there's a lot of infighting within enablement on how it should be defined and what it could look like. What was it like for you to go from this environment where everything was while difficult and high pressure, formulaic, to going into enablement, which is very gray and very differentiated and very subjective? What was that transition like?
It's tough. I think it got tougher as I went on, is a good way to put it. And the reason I say that is because I still love enablement with all my core. I'm getting to the point where I'm getting very burnt out from trying to, fight for what enablement is and what enablement should be and how we should be supporting it within the company. I actually just Friday met with my boss's boss, our COO, CRO, change titles, but it was good conversation to just really, level set and say, how are you seeing enablement? And it was a nice, like, yeah, okay, we're on the same page. So I appreciate that kind of thing. And sometimes that's what you have to do. Was it nerve-wracking? Yes. But it's something that you really need to have that level set. Obviously, I had my boss's permission and let him know, so it didn't look like I was lily pad hopping over people. But it was just something, I guess it's tough. It's a hard conversation, but it's a needed conversation to get that anxiety down. So it doesn't seem like you're fighting for relevancy with enablement. It doesn't seem like there's a bunch of definitions out there, and you continue to align, and that's what your charters are for. That's what, your strategy's for. Our strategy is very tight. Yeah, do we look at it constantly, myself and my teammate? Yep. But do we change it all the time? Only month to month with what our priorities are? But we redo it every 6 months to make sure it's aligned with the company goals. So yeah, I think that's where the burnout sometimes comes from. And I challenge other people to see if they feel that way too. Again, we love enablement, a lot of us, but it's that fighting for where does it sit in the org, or where does it, I don't care where you sit in the org. I care are you still fighting for the good fight for enablement? So
do you think the enablement should be one of those things where there is a standard definition, or is it more of like the closest thing I can think of to this where there is a role, where is a known role, but depending on where you work, the roles and responsibilities are a little bit different. So think of like an account manager / CSM. And depending on the org that you are at, they are either quota carrying, non-quota carrying. They either renew or they don't renew. They either expand or they don't expand. They're responsible for either NPS or CNPS, and it really just like depends, right? So that's one of those roles where if I were to walk into any room and say like, what do your account managers do? I would not get the same answer, but it's because that role fits the need of the customer and the sales process and whatnot. Do you feel like enablement is more one of those where it's actually an okay thing that it's defined differently at various organizations because the role fits the need? Or because there's a lot of people that believe enablement should be defined like this, right? Like rarely at an organization when you say account executive are people like, well, what are the roles and responsibilities of an account executive, right? It's like, we just know that, right? They have a playbook. This is what they do. Which side of the fence are you on in terms of how it should be defined?
I guess we should back up a little bit and
back that thing up then.
Yeah. And the reason I say this is because I just had a conversation. I met our Salesforce account manager, and it was cute because she says, I was actually Googling what revenue enablement was right before we got on the call. And I'm like, okay, girl, like, and that's cool. Like, but what people need to understand what it is in general of like what that role is servicing within the company.
Yeah.
And I want that to be known, because if someone's questioning it, and that's actually a more common thing than you think, Christina, unfortunately. So we need to understand like what that does. Because like you're saying, account manager will change based on those things, account manager, CSM, but everyone knows what an account manager is, right? So I think whether, it's based on the company and whatnot, we need to start with that education of what enablement is doing within a company. And it's whether it's sales enablement, revenue enablement, it's like whatever you want to call it. I just think people need to know those things. And it's sad that we're still at that point. But at the same time, I do find myself needing to do more education every single time I come into a company. So I would start there. But then to your point, yeah, it probably could go either way. Like when I came in, for example, to the company I'm at now, they referred to it as sales enablement. Well, sales enablement at the time was check the box training, and it was a very reactive type function. Now that I'm here, I made sure that we changed the role to revenue enablement, and we service many different facets of the company. And I refer to myself as Penn Station. We get the right stuff to the right person at the right time. We are the schedule keepers of when that stuff comes in and out. And that's what we should be doing as revenue enablement. What those things are that go in and out is where the sales are. Revenue enablement, big flip. But that's where our charter comes in, of those roles and responsibilities of what we should or shouldn't be doing come in. So.
Well, it's almost like sales enablement is underneath the umbrella of revenue enablement.
Agreed.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about like the broad understanding of what enablement does?
We're quote unquote just training.
Just training for salespeople, or just training.
That's the biggest misconception. And then the other thing is that we shouldn't be doing coaching. We should, I had that one come up. That's a big one. We should stay in our swim lane with no collaboration with HR and marketing is another one. That's sales enablement, maybe. Okay. So I'm understanding where these things can come from, but revenue enablement should be collaborating. Revenue enablement is a big, big collaborator. And I think that's where it should have a bigger seat at the table in terms of being with all of the marketing, the sales, the finance, the HR, and comms. Like, we should absolutely be speaking to those folks. I know when I go into a company, my three best friends, we are the three best friends that anyone could have, are going to be comms, HR, and legal. Those are the three best friends that I go and find because of what's going to happen and what's going to end up coming out of our relationship.
Well, along those same lines, would you say that the skill set, the background, the acumen of somebody who is like, I am a sales enablement professional versus I'm a revenue enablement professional, are those two different people?
Yeah. And like you said, the reason I say that is because I agree with you. I think that sales enablement should fall underneath revenue enablement. Revenue enablement does a lot more strategizing than a sales enablement person would. Sales enablement should be more tunnel vision than revenue enablement.
Mm-hmm.
So
loving this, by the way. I'm like,
me too.
Because I feel like so few people actually break it down and talk about like how should an org be built with this idea of revenue enablement at the top. Because then the very natural next question I'm going to have for you is going to be, how does ops fit into that? Which I know, like, if you go into a room and you're like, what about ops? Like, half the people are like, well, and the other half, well, I'm going to punch you in the face. And it's because there's so much overlap, right? Because we hear like revenue operations, and a lot of people think that sales enablement should report up to revenue operations, but then if you have revenue enablement, so again, it can be a tangled web, and it's why it's so difficult to get a foundational understanding. But kind of in your view of this idea of revenue enablement is this big umbrella where you have all of these little pieces and functions underneath. Where do you feel like operation fits in with that? Are they next to it? Are they under it?
So we actually, I'm going to answer that, but it might be a roundabout way. So we report into we report into revenue operation.
Okay.
We have two folks that have, so our pillars are systems and tools. We have 5 pillars. Systems and tools, which has like all our tech stacks, and they own Salesforce. We have an OA, which is like a deals desk, is number 2. Revenue enablement is in the middle, and then it's for a reason. We have a data and analytics, and then we have commissions.
Okay.
So revenue enablement is in the middle. So that way, again, we can be that Penn Station. So let's say Salesforce need CPQ training. We can go out and do, come the right way. Commissions, we get that in our newsletter to make sure, like, you got any qualms about your commissions, we got to figure that out, right? But to answer your question, since we sit under RevOps, one of those other pillars could be sales ops. We have 2 fantastic data guys. One of those could be more just focused sales ops, while the other one goes in a little higher level. and does more so all around, like with marketing, finance, HR. And I think that that could be more of a revenue functionality versus just sales functionality, right? So we could each start pillaring off and do sub pillars. I think that the sales op piece in terms of for what's happening with us, again, if we had the head count, we could do something like that. We don't have that. So pillaring off wouldn't make sense for us right now.
Yeah. And then that kind of goes back to, if you are looking at joining an organization that is hiring for enablement, it sounds like one of the questions that you can ask in the interview process is, let's map out your go-to-market team and your entire revenue org. And let's think about right now where you're wanting to place this role, and does where you want to place this role match the roles and responsibilities that you are asking for of this individual? Do they have the right kind of oversight? Are they going to have the right kind of skill set? Are they going to have the right kind of budgetary, and authority decisions to make? Who are they reporting into? How are they going to be measured? Like, most companies just know, like, it's time to hire enablement, and it is guided mostly by being like, our salespeople need training, and then they hire enablement, and then it's like and then the enablement gets in there, and they're like, hey, you should have just hired a sales trainer, but you hired an enablement professional, and this is what I do. And then you wind up, and then you hear a lot of enablement people who get super frustrated and burned out because they join an organization that is really just looking for a sales trainer. That's misguided, by the way, right? Like, we could spend a lot of time talking about why, if you are noticing that you are wanting better results or more cohesiveness, don't hire a sales trainer, hire enablement, but that's an episode for a different day. But it sounds like you just gave a really good playbook for how to properly interview and find a role that aligns with the actual job of enablement versus the perceived job by folks who are not in the industry.
Yeah, because if you're not, and this is the thing too that I caution folks, depending on your skill set or level, a lot of jobs I'm seeing out there right now are looking for a senior enablement manager. And that is such a farce.
What does that mean?
Yeah, well, exactly. But they'll hire them. The pay is, in some cases, pretty darn high for what they're doing. I mean, that role, maybe not senior, but enablement manager used to run like 70, 80K. Those are now 170, 180K for a senior enablement manager.
Oh, yeah.
Now, again, like, we could, another episode for another day, but we could run through and go through what some of those job titles and, cut out the company's name. But what they're asking you to do, and some of these people are very junior, you're looking at a more of a VP role of what some of those are and what they're asking you for. And I'm also seeing not VP roles, but director roles that they're calling you director of enablement and sales operations.
Oh, yeah. I was at an org recently where they tried to kind of pull that one. The nomenclature of titling, it's the same thing for like VP of sales. Like, VP of sales, you go on LinkedIn right now, and it's anywhere from like starting account executive to a fourth line leader. And it's like, there's no... And we could spend probably all day just breaking down the wild title and role nomenclature that exists. But we are ending.
Yes, we are.
Nearing the end. We are ending. Goodbye. We are near the end. We're done. End of our time. That's how I like to end every episode. Cold, like a cold kind of. We'll wonder if they're like broke.
Goodbye.
Yeah, they're like, this is.
Thanks, Jane Lynch.
We are nearing the rapid reveal section where you have 3 questions and you have 60 seconds or less to answer each. Are you on board?
I am on board.
Great. Number 1, what is your favorite tip to motivate someone when they're having a real hard day?
Shut down.
Yeah, well,
like legit take some time for yourself.
And shut down the okay. You're like, go ahead, go with it.
Yes. No, like, legit just give yourself a break. Like, shut down your computer, put your phone down, just walk away, go turn on the TV for a hot second. You just turn on the Kardashians. You want to see somebody that's a mess more than you are?
You're not Bravo. Like, I don't. Yeah. I love it. That's probably the realest, best advice that I've gotten, which is like, pick yourself up, do that. It's like, just when you said shut down initially, I took that as like shut down emotionally. And I was like, well,
no.
Hey. And I was like, you know what? Listen, it's your advice to like shut down.
Give yourself a moment. Like, be real. Yeah.
I love it. And number 2, what's an irrational fear of yours?
I am petrified of spiders. I can't even see a cartoon one. And now that I've said that, my phone's going to pop up with them like crawling on my screen. So thank you.
I know, I'm really sorry. I mean, spiders, that's like a tried and true.
Absolutely. I
know. Like a big, furry, cute spider.
No, they're not. That is not cute, Christina, in no shape or form.
Do
you know how many eyes are on those things?
Yeah, but they're not cute.
Oh, they have eyelashes like you? Really?
They're gonna flutter at you. I feel like it's the little spiders that freak me out, but like the big furry ones, I was like, furry things are friends.
Yeah, I can't even talk about. I'm like getting chills. I can't. We're third
No.
question.
Number 3. What's a hidden talent of yours?
I figure skated for 12 years.
We talked about this, that we both were figure skaters, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I looked at a couple of older photos of me as a figure skater, and I can say as much as I thought I had an athlete's body, I did not.
I also thought the same thing. And when I look at a picture of me, my mom bought me an American Girl's human-sized dress. And again, we mentioned this, my parents didn't name me Grace for a reason. But just the pose I'm in for this professional photo just shows I never even should have been put on the ice ever in my life.
Yeah, but you know what? I also blame the photographers, because looking back, like, there was no way that the poses they were making you do, like, there's no way that this would look flattering. Like, you're making it look like I just tripped and blew my back out. Take a picture. Like, it's very strange. Like,
I look like I would have fit in with a whole gamut or bevy of camels in the desert, more so than.
Well, I drank a lot of water as a kid, so that checks. Oh my goodness. I can imagine, especially given a lot of your tactics on how to properly outline enablement in the workplace, people are going to want to get to know you, connect with you, maybe talk further. How can people find you?
Yes, reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jenn Glabicky. I am here for any questions, any comments. Happy to chat with folks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for. Well, it's been
Thank you, my dear. I appreciate it. And go Leicester. Very proud of you.
Well, Leicester. That's all, folks.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Taking the Lead. If you're looking for more inspiring stories from women leaders in B2B tech, then visit us at motionagency.io/takingthelead.